Investigators believe that the Idaho 4 crimes were carried out by a complete stranger. So why do they look so personal? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk a little bit about something that continues to nag me about the Idaho 4. Basically, the idea that there were 4 victims on 2 separate levels, but only believed to be one target. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether there's one target or multiple targets, and also about who this target may have been. I just feel like it would be a stretch to believe that 4 people were targeted in one house in a pre-planned attack. A pre-planned attack that was also carried out in rage. Now, what would make someone that angry? Angry enough to where they would take multiple people's lives? Maybe jealousy or betrayal, maybe even embarrassment, maybe all 3. If only one of the victims was the target, then why would the attacker go out of their way to take 2 more? I mean, it would make sense that they may have to take 2 lives if their target was with another person. But after you've reached your target, why would this attacker go on to take 2 more? Whether the attacks began on the 3rd level or the main level, the perpetrators could have easily left after they reached their target, but they didn't do that. Instead, they went into another bedroom and attacked 2 more victims. So after they've accomplished what they were there to accomplish, why would they go after more victims and just stay longer in the house, increasing their risk that they could get caught or maybe even attacked themselves? It would just seem odd to me that this attacker would reach their target and accomplish their goal, take this target's life, and then go after 2 additional victims who were uninvolved in the reason that the attacker was there in the first place. That just doesn't make sense. How did this attacker get all of these victims and take their lives one right after another without anyone running away? In my opinion, this doesn't look like a stranger went into this house and carried out this crime. In my opinion, this looks like something erupted from inside the house, with the people who were inside the house already. The people in the King Roadhouse may have been intoxicated or on substances or both. And it's very possible that maybe things spun out of control and people lost their lives. In my opinion, these crimes look very, very personal. I mean, did someone just walk through an unlocked door at a strange house and go in and take the lives of 4 strangers with a knife for no reason? Or did something happen inside the King Roadhouse? Was this a big fight among people who knew each other? Maybe these people were under the influence of alcohol or other substances, or like I said, maybe both. Maybe things spun out of control between the people who were already inside the house. This crime has a lot of personal feelings to it. When you look at the details, a lot of this is very, very personal. So, in my opinion, if this is a very, very personal crime, I believe that there's a good chance that this was all self-contained in the King Roadhouse, that this was a fight among the people who were already inside the house. Steve Gonsalves said very early on that there was one hell of a battle going on in that house. Now, why would the mayor come out and say that this was a crime of passion? Why would a news outlet report that there was someone from the house taken to the hospital that morning, whether it be by ambulance or maybe private vehicle? Why would nobody call 911 right away, even though friends had come over to the house mid-morning? Why did none of them call 911? And why would the University of Idaho lift their shelter in place almost immediately? And why would law enforcement tell the community that there was no longer any danger? That the people of this community were safe from whoever committed this crime? Only hours into this investigation, law enforcement was already assuring the community that there was no longer a danger in this area. They didn't have a suspect. They were only hours into this investigation, and they were assuring the people of this community that they were safe. Now, does that sound like some crazy homicidal maniac running around with a knife who just took the lives of 4 people? It seems as though there would have been more urgency. Stay in your homes. We don't know where this individual's at. But law enforcement was very, very confident that whoever committed this crime was no longer in this area and would no longer commit any more crimes. Now, in my opinion, the only way that they could be confident in saying that is if the perpetrator was deceased or in custody. And as far as we know, they didn't have anyone in custody. I've said this before, and I still believe this. I believe that the K-bar knife was already inside the King Roadhouse. I don't believe that an attacker brought this knife into the crime scene. I believe this K-bar belonged to someone who was inside this house. I don't believe that the sheath was pulled from the attacker. And I don't believe that someone with the capability to go into a house and take on 4 healthy young adults and take their lives with a knife, one right after another, and get away clean, made that type of mistake. I don't believe they dropped their knife sheath in the middle of the crime scene. That's just my opinion. What would make a lot of sense is that the K-bar was owned by someone inside the house, and that's why the sheath was there. It's very possible that whoever carried out these crimes took that K-bar from whoever owned it and used it against them. Someone who they knew, someone who was already inside the house. I feel like the reason that this attacker was able to move around so freely and just go from room to room is because they were familiar with this house and familiar with these victims. They wouldn't get the same reaction that a complete stranger would get if they were standing inside a house in the middle of the night. I feel like this attacker knew who was where on each level. They may have even put Murphy in Kaylee's bedroom. There's plenty of news stories from all over the country where a family member or someone who lives in a house takes the lives of everyone inside. It happens. It's easier for someone to control a situation that they're familiar with. If a victim is approached by someone who they know or someone that they are familiar with, they're not thinking that this individual is going to take their lives, as opposed to running into a stranger in your house in the middle of the night who's carrying a knife. Then they know that they are in immediate danger. But when they know the individual, they're not thinking that this person is going to cross that line, that this person is going to take their life. Now, something else is that if this was about one or two targets, why wouldn't they get to these targets while they were alone? Why would this perpetrator wait until they were inside their own house with 6 other people? That just doesn't make sense. If they don't know these people, they don't know what's going on inside that house. They don't know that there's 6 people inside that house. Those 6 people could have friends over. There could be 10 people inside that house. There could be 12, 15, 20 people inside this party house. So why not get to your target while they're alone, rather than risk getting caught up by these other individuals who are inside the house? Also risking that these other people could call law enforcement, maybe attack you themselves. It just doesn't make sense to me that if there was only one target or 2 targets, why not get them when they were alone outside of the house, rather than go into their environment and risk your own safety? There would be a lot of risk for someone to just blindly walk into this house carrying a knife. These roommates may have their own weapons. This attacker really didn't need to take the lives of more people other than the person who they were targeting. It was reported that all 4 victims were found in 2 beds. So if these victims were still in bed, then obviously this attacker was not confronted inside the house. Law enforcement describes it as though these attacks began while everybody was in their beds asleep. We know that they weren't asleep, but that's how it was described in the very beginning. So if all these roommates were in their beds, this attacker could have gone and gotten to their victim, taken their victim's life. They obviously would have had to take the witness's life as well. And then they could have easily just left. But they didn't do that. They go looking for more targets. To me, that doesn't make sense. This attacker has accomplished what they set out to do. Why stick around? In my opinion, this does not look like a strategic attack. Had it been a strategic attack, they would have gotten this individual while they were alone. They wouldn't have taken unnecessary risks by going into a house full of people. They don't know how many people are inside this house. It's a Saturday night inside of a house that's known for having a lot of parties. So they don't know how many people are inside this house. Now, Xana's dad stated in an interview that he spoke to Xana, or that he was in contact with Xana at midnight, and that Xana told him that her and Ethan were at the King Roadhouse watching movies and eating pizza. So I know that it's been said that Xana and Ethan were at the Sigma Chi house. But in my opinion, they left that party early. In my opinion, law enforcement doesn't know where they were between 9 and 1:45 a.m. Even though Xana's dad came out and said she was at home. She told me that she was at home at midnight watching movies and eating pizza with Ethan. Now, why would Xana lie to her dad about where she was. I mean, I don't think it was any secret that Xana liked to party. All of the roommates liked to party. So why would Xana have a problem telling her dad that her and Ethan were at a party? That just doesn't make sense. And then also, why would law enforcement just totally discount what Xana's dad said? I mean, I think he would know when he talked to his daughter. Now, at just before 3 a.m., Kaylee and Maddie are calling Jack D over and over and over again. And then at 2:59, those calls stop. So they were on their phone. And those calls, the one right after another seems very urgent. What would be so urgent that they needed to get Jack D to answer the phone when they had just seen him at the corner club less than an hour before that? Now at 4 a.m., there's a DoorDash delivery, which we can assume that Xana probably placed that order quite a bit prior to the order arriving at 4 a.m. because it was a busy weekend in Moscow, Idaho. There was a big football game and there was a lot of parties going on. So I would think that Xana placed this order, well ahead of when it arrived at 4 a.m. We don't even know that Xana ever picked up that order. That order could have it was a contactless delivery. So that food could have been sitting on the front porch until the next morning. We don't know that anybody brought that food into the house that night. It could have easily been brought in by one of the friends that showed up mid-morning. Now, at 4:12 a.m., Xana is on TikTok. She's on her phone. Now, law enforcement believes that these crimes began at 4 a.m., the same time the DoorDash was dropped off. So I have a hard time believing that these crimes are going on upstairs and that Xana doesn't hear this. She's on TikTok at 4:12, allegedly. Her phone is being used at 4:12 a.m. That's right in the middle of when law enforcement believes that these crimes began. Why would Xana order more food if her and Ethan were just eating pizza at midnight? Something that I think about is who would have had access to these victims' phones? Who would have had access to Xana's phone? It does seem odd that she's on TikTok at 4:12 when investigators believe that these crimes began at 4 o'clock. So is it possible that maybe it wasn't Xana who was using her phone? Maybe someone was using her phone to throw off the timeline. Now, people say, that it sounds crazy that someone from inside this house was the one who committed these crimes. But in my opinion, it makes a lot more sense than the idea that a stranger just walked into this house through an unlocked door and took the lives of 4 victims in this house with a knife, one right after another. Nobody tried to get away. They were all in their beds. They were all found in their beds. That doesn't make sense either. Nobody tried to get out of the bedroom. Nobody tried to get out of the house. Nobody ran. This stranger went into this house and took 4 lives, one right after another, and then walked out of that house clean. To me, that sounds crazy. There's a lot more to this, and we're going to talk about it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Now, this week we will be talking about the Travis and Jamelyn Jutin case, as well as beginning a deep dive into the Sandra Ladd case. Now, tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'll be live with A.R. Hayes on A Convict's Thoughts. And we have some really interesting stuff to talk about when it comes to the Idaho 4. I'm really excited about this show. It's going to be a good one. So like I said, thanks for hanging out with me today. We'll see you next time.